Speaker. Thank you for some of those figures which the member opposite has given us, and very pleased to hear that Labor left us with a zero debt at the end of their term. I wonder how come it might be that they started in their term of government with a $34.4 billion debt and ended with a $34.7 billion debt. How does that work? Perhaps if they could figure that one out, they might be able to figure out how to get back in the Treasury benches. Also, I'd like to ask, considering that when we increased GST that a 2.02% compensation was given to all New Zealanders, what was the amount that the Labor government at the time compensated the people of New Zealand when they increased GST from 10% to 12.5%? Does anybody recall that amount? What was that amount? 0%. 0%. So no compensation.
How fair is that?
Yes, how fair is that? Mr Speaker, I think it's quite obvious that we have an opposition who are very selective in their memory regarding the issues of their fiscal management. Mr Speaker, we've heard much in this budget debate, but we also need to be real. We need to understand about the history that this government has inherited. We've heard much about the property bubble of the 2000s. There's even been recent talk about a commodity bubble. In a world of inflation and deflation, bubbles go up and they go down, and sometimes they also pop. What this government is all about is bringing some equalisation, some balance and some sustainability into the growth of our economy, so that wealth generation does not go through speculative boom and bust cycles. Savings and investment, rather than, in many cases, borrowing and speculation, will ensure that New Zealanders in the future have a stronger foundation for their wealth creation. As we look back, in the 15 years to the end of 2004, New Zealanders experienced significant improvements in their standards of living. Real GDP increased by an average of 3.2%, and during that time, nearly 500,000 jobs were created during that period. That's over 33,000 jobs a year. So when Treasury forecast 4% growth and lift that figure from 33,000 upwards, then we can understand that that sort of estimation is based upon a historical record. However, since the performance of the economy up until 2004, the strength of that, it has steadily declined. Real GDP per person has not grown since 2004. The economy was in recession even before the global financial crisis hit. The downturn in economic performance coincided with a number of factors. For example, the construction and housing market boom, with the prices of existing houses increasing 115% between 2001 and 2007. Household debt as a share of disposable income rose from 105% in 2001 to almost 160% in 2009. We were growing our wealth based on borrowing and speculation. What this budget does is bring New Zealanders and the government to a place where we look at a stronger fiscal foundation for our growth towards the future. What has also been seen during this time was a decrease in the growth of our exports. Real export growth from 2004 on was averaging less than 1.4% a year, compared with 5.4% in the previous 15. There were no new jobs created in the export sector from 2004 onwards. We were in a very sad and sorry situation as a country. But what was growing was an increase in the state sector by 50% under the previous government. Over the last 2.5 years, Mr Speaker, the New Zealand economy has by necessity been readjusting. We have seen that absolute necessity to bring the economy on to a more sustainable footing. This is what Budget 2011 does. You can only borrow for so long until the odds turn against you. As a country, our net debt, being private, public borrowing, has put us in an uncomfortable position of being seen in the same category as nations such as Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain. We have seen a massive increase of spending over this last decade. That spending has not just been in the private sector around the purchase of perhaps domestic properties, but also been around spending of core Crown initiatives and expenses. In 2004, our core Crown spending was sitting at just over 27% of GDP. That figure has grown to 35%. New Zealanders got used to spending more and expecting more. We have gone through a decade of opulence. But now, after facing the global financial crisis, New Zealanders are now seeing the need for more prudence, which is why the vast majorities of New Zealanders support this budget. Prudent, prosaic, pragmatic economics like this need to rule the day. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2011 does this. The government, in its prudent management, has looked ahead. They have asked what is sustainable in its present form and what isn't. Not like those opposite who continue to put their head in the sand and have a borrowing and spending program which doesn't address the real issues in terms of the thinking of New Zealanders. We have asked, what can we truly afford? Not only for the economic cost, but also the social cost to our country. We have identified that programs which New Zealanders support, such as KiwiSaver, Working for Families, had needed some adjustment in order to be truly sustainable on a long-term footing. This is about building certainty and sustainability. We have been working on state sector improvements on frontline services since the beginning of this government's term. For 2 years, we've signalled to the public sector the need for greater efficiency following large increases in public spending in the last decade. Why? Because the tradable sector, the sector which earns our country income, must become more predominant in our economy. And the state sector needs to take a smaller piece of the pie. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to better value for money from public spending so we can build better, smarter public services for all New Zealanders. National is capping back office jobs and streamlining bureaucracy to focus on frontline services. As a result of these efficiencies, we have seen 300 more police officers, 1,600 more teachers, 1,000 more nurses, 500 extra doctors. The total number of equivalent positions in important frontline areas has increased by around 6%. We have kept core government administration, excluding frontline services, at around 38,000. There are now 2,000 fewer full-time positions, but during a time when we have increased frontline positions. Under National, there are 17% fewer communications and PR advisors in the public service. So while we have seen increases in frontline, the overall total of EFTs in the state sector has decreased. Mr. Speaker, we are achieving more for less.
That's right.
More for less. Public Service Administration grew 50% under Labor. Growth in the public service averaged 5% or around 1,800 people per year. I think, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing this government providing more public services for less cost to the New Zealand taxpayer. That is why this government has popular support around Budget 2011. Thank you.
I call the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.